2022. Can I please remind you all to switch your phones to silent for the duration of the meeting? In addition, can I refer to you to the protocols for remote meetings, which have been previously circulated? Namely, your microphones should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. The Democratic Services Officer will take a roll call at the start of this meeting for all members and officers. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either via the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams? I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. When speaking, please introduce yourself. I am Councillor John Warman, Mayor. Jane, if you could take a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll mark you as present. Apologies from Councillor Aubrey. Councillor Scott Bamsey. Councillor Bamsey.
Present, Jane. Yeah, present, Jane.
Thank you. Councillor Causey.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Clement Williams.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Crowley.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Lynch. Councillor Davis, Arthur Davis.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Nicola Davis.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Oliver Davis.
Present, thank you, Jane.
Councillor Ros Davis.
Presennol, present.
Apologies received from Councillor Caroline Edwards. Councillor Jamie Evans. Councillor Freegard.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Galsworthy.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Wyndham Griffiths.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Joe Hale.
Present, thank you, Jane.
Councillor Sian Harris.
Present, Jane, thank you.
Apologies received from Councillor Mike Harvey. Councillor Nigel Hunt.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Steve Hunt.
I am here, Jane, thank you.
Councillor Hurley.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Chris James.
Present, Jane.
Apologies from Councillor Hugh James. Councillor Chris Jones.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Dorian Jones.
I'm here, Jane.
Councillor Hugh Jones.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Jane Jones.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Leanne Jones.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Rob Jones.
Yes, I'm here, Jane.
Councillor Scott Jones.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Keogh.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Noyle.
I'm here, thanks, Jane.
Councillor Latham.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Dean Lewis. Councillor Llewellyn.
Presennol, diolch, Jane. Present.
Councillor Lockyer.
Present, Jane.
Councillor McGrath. Councillor John Miller.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Sandra Miller.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Maisen. Councillor Maisen. Councillor Del Morgan, Deputy Mayor.
Present.
Councillor Pardison.
Present.
Councillor Penry.
Present, Jane.
Apologies from Councillor Martin Peters. Councillor Rebecca Phillips. Councillor Prothero.
Yes, I'm here, thanks, Jane.
Apologies from Councillor Purcell. Councillor Percy.
Present.
Councillor Harman.
Present, Jane.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Rees.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Renkes.
Present.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present.
Councillor Anthony Richards.
Presennol, present.
Councillor Peter Richards.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Spooner. Councillor Anthony Taylor.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Rachel Taylor.
Present, Jane.
Councillor Whitelock.
Present, thank you, Jane.
Apologies from Councillor Chris Williams and apologies from Annette Wingrave. Councillor Rob Wood.
Present, thanks, Jane.
And Councillor Woolcock.
Presennol, Mr. Mayor.
I will now go on to officers. Karen Jones,
Present.
Andrew Thomas,
Present Jane.
Nicola Pierce,
Present Jane.
Mike Shaw,
Yes, here, Jane, thank you.
Stacey Curran,
Present, thanks Jane.
Karen Furlow,
Present Jane.
Sheena Rees,
Present Jane.
Andrew Jarrett. I know he's not well at the moment, so I'm not quite sure. Andrew Jarrett, yes, I can see you present, Andrew.
Present Jane.
Is there any other officers present that I have not called out who are participating in the meeting?
Yeah, I'm present, Jane. Hugh Jones.
Thank you, Hugh. There we are. And if I now go on to Wales Audit Office, Non Jenkins
Present.
and Gillian Gillett.
Present.
There we are, Mr. Mayor. The roll call is complete.
Thank you, Jane. Before I start my announcements, I call upon the leader to address the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, at the last meeting of council, there was a unanimous condemnation of the actions taken by Vladimir Putin and the Russian government, but also unanimous support for the Ukraine government and the people of Ukraine. We would have all watched with horror the escalation of the war since. Many people have lost their lives, their homes, and their livelihoods. The scale of the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding is horrific, and there is a real urgency to put in place practical means of support for those who have been displaced from their homes. I fully support the First Minister's commitment that Wales should be a nation of sanctuary, and to this end, officers and members of the Cabinet are actively engaging with Welsh Government to make speedy preparations to receive Ukrainian refugees. On Monday of this week, the UK Government announced two special visa routes. A family visa route. This is now open and essentially provides a pathway for those refugees who have family already resident in the UK. The second route is the Home for Ukrainians scheme. From Monday of this week, those who have accommodation that they can offer for at least 6 months can register their intent in participating in this scheme. There are two sub-elements to this programme. The first is for people with accommodation who know Ukrainians seeking support, and the second will be for those people who have accommodation but do not have a connection to a Ukrainian seeking support. In the second element, civic society, for example, church groups and charities, will have a role in matching someone seeking support with someone who's able to provide support. When there is a match between someone offering support and someone requesting support, the digital portal provides for a criminal record check of both parties. And if that is satisfactory, a visa is then issued. Those with a visa will have the right to access public funds and public services from the point of arrival. Local authorities will be expected to make local safeguarding checks to make sure that the accommodation is suitable and so on. There is no UK assistance with travel. It is for the refugee to find their way to the UK. Welsh Government have agreed in principle with the UK Government that they would wish to operate as a super sponsor. As part of this role, the Welsh Government would be looking to establish a number of reception areas before dispersing refugees to a network of accommodation. Local authorities will receive a tariff of £10,500 per refugee in year 1, but the tariff for years 2 and 3 is yet to be determined. The funding is intended to meet the costs of providing services, for example, education for those families with children of school age. As colleagues will appreciate, this is a very fast-moving picture which is subject to considerable change. The Chief Executive has asked that the Director of Social Services, Mr. Andrew Jarrett, coordinates this Council's involvement in the humanitarian effort. He will be establishing an internal cross-directorate group to coordinate our own service response and a second multi-agency group to coordinate the wider community response. Mr. Mayor, on the back of the pandemic, when many services, particularly care, education and housing, are under severe ongoing pressure, there will be challenges ahead. However, we will pull out all the stops to play a full part in responding to this humanitarian crisis. In addition, of course, to the humanitarian crisis that we are responding to, there are wider ramifications for us. We are already seeing the cost of living crisis hit many of our residents hard, and the increased energy costs and related inflationary pressures will compound this. The Chief Executive is taking steps to establish these wider impacts and how we can mobilise the best response. As we move into the pre-election period, arrangements will be put in place to ensure there is a regular communication with elected members so that we are all working cohesively to support our communities and our local businesses, whilst also ensuring Ukrainian people find a safe and supported haven here in Neath Talbot. Mr. Mayor, the Chief Executive will be arranging for this brief update to be sent via email to all elected members following this meeting today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader, for that statement. I now go on to my announcements. This is the last meeting of the Council before the election, and I know that some members will be retiring. I'm sure that all members would join with me in wishing them best wishes for the future. Invitations will be circulated in due course from my office, asking retiring members to a reception to thank them for all the commitment they have given to Neath Talbot Council. I will bring members in under urgent items to comment further. I now go on to item 3, which is members' interests, and I call upon Mike Shaw to advise members on interest relating to the pay policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, members. In respect of item number 5, that is the pay policy statement, some members may consider they have interests to declare in respect of this particular item. This may be because, for example, you have a family member or a relative or friend who may benefit, or whose well-being or financial position may benefit by this particular decision. Given that, members, if you do have such interests, you'll be invited to raise your electronic hand at the appropriate time. There is a dispensation which has been granted in respect of this item, so any member that considers they have a personal and prejudicial interest will be able to benefit by the dispensation. So if I might ask Jane, if we can have a show of hands from any members who do have an interest, and if you wish to benefit by the dispensation, if you can indicate accordingly, please.
Thank you, members. If you could just leave your hands up, I'm just making a note of the members who have raised their hands. So if you could just bear with me for one moment. There we are. Mr. Mayor, I've made a note of all the members who have got declarations of interest. A form will be circulated after the meeting for members to complete and return to me, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can also declare an interest on the part of all the officers that are on the call this afternoon, with the exception of Sheena Rees and Jane Woodman-Ralph, we'll be withdrawing from the meeting when the item is discussed and rejoining the meeting then when you're ready to proceed with the rest of the agenda.
Thank you. I now go on to agenda item 4, which is Audit Wales Annual Audit Summary 2021. Council, we have with us today Non Jenkins and Gillian Gillett from Audit Wales, who will be presenting the Annual Audit Summary 2021. Non Jenkins, please.
I'm really sorry, Mr. Mayor. Can somebody call in Councillor Lynch because she hasn't had a meeting request?
I have done, Councillor Clement Williams.
you.
I've asked her.
And good afternoon, Non Jenkins here from Audit Wales, and Gillian's here with me too. Diolch yn fawr iawn i chi. Thank you very much for the invitation to come to your meeting this afternoon, and also to put us early on in the agenda because both of us have other meetings following this one. So thank you, diolch yn fawr iawn. What you have before you today in your packs on page 9 onwards is the annual summary of all our audit and regulation work over the last year since we did the last one, last January, I think it was. So you will have seen all that's in it before. It is genuinely a summary of those issues that we've brought to the various committees and governance and audit committees throughout the year, but it just gives you a flavour and also includes the links to all the reports that we have issued to you as a council, but also to all councils in Wales where that's relevant. So in that sense, it is very much something you've seen before with no surprises. And really, it's an opportunity for us also to make the point of thanking you in particular for all of the work that you have done, especially over the last 2 years in such challenging and difficult times. Thank you very much from us as regulators for that. And we've worked really well and flexibly with you as officers and members throughout that time to try and help and back off when we've needed, because we know that you've been facing pressures. So thank you from us to you on that, and look forward to working with you over the next year in terms of our ongoing work. Diolch yn fawr iawn. And any questions, happy to take. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Non. Members, are there any questions or comments? Please raise your electronic hand or indicate via the chat function, and I will call upon you in turn. I call upon, first of all, Councillor Carol Clement Williams, please.
Sort of just a note of thanks for all the work that the finance teams have put in, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Nigel Hunt, you indicated.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's a few points on there really I'd like to bring up, and one of them is that in the key facts, it says about there being 14 areas of deprivation within the county. So 3 of those 14, 3 of them are in the ward that I represent, and neighbouring wards like Sanfleas West has 3, Sanfleas East has 2, Talbot has 1, Britton Ferry has 1. There's a few in the Neath. I think there's 1 in Neath North, 2 in Neath East, and there's 1 in the valleys, in the Avon Valley, Cymru. Do you think we're doing enough to try and level up these areas and to make these areas rise in terms of the Welsh Index of multiple deprivation, I worry about green space in my own area and HMOs, etc. I was only speaking with the police commissioner yesterday about us only having 2 PCSOs, even though we're entitled to 4. But do you think we're doing enough there to equalise in these, particularly in the urban areas, in Neath, Talbot, the high levels of deprivation? Also, a key fact there, it says about us having £79.1 million of usable reserves. That's the 10th highest in Wales, and yet we have one of the highest council tax. Do you think we could have more equilibrium between those two facts, that high level of council tax and the high level of reserves, particularly the general reserves? And also the town centre, there's a bit on the town centre regeneration. So I'm on the regeneration committee, so we've read the report, and it says about the capacity, really, that a lot of local authorities do not have the capacity to respond to the situation, and are not always using the powers that they must need to regenerate towns. And there was also things about car parking spaces, how that's having an adverse effect, car parking charges, sorry, on town centres. And possibly in the past, we focused too much on retail and not enough cultural space. How could we really improve our the cultural spaces in our town centres? Because I think this lacking. I know the Levelling Up Fund was a great opportunity, and I'm sure the Shared Prosperity Fund will be a great opportunity for us to improve our cultural spaces. But does that concern you as well, the lack of cultural space in NPT in the towns? And that's my questions. Thanks, and thank you for the report as well.
Thank you for those. I think there are a few questions in there for officers also to come back on, but if I can take some of those. You mentioned in terms of the deprivation, interestingly, you'll be interested in the work around poverty that we're doing across Wales at the moment. So that will come out in the next year or so in terms of report, and you will be sent obviously a copy of that. So that will be quite useful, I think, to everybody involved with public services, not just councils on that, but we're looking at it from various angles. So that will come before you, and is very much on the radar, as you know, given the pressures that the increased pressures, I suppose, over the last 2 years. So thank you for raising that, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to advertise our forthcoming work. So thanks on that one. In terms of council tax and reserves, that's a political and policy issue for you as councillor to take, and we'll leave that with you on that point, and for any officers to come back on that should they wish. And in terms of town centres, again, you know, it is a time now, isn't it, to look at how to regenerate them differently and to make the most of what has gone well and what more can we do in the future. And hopefully, I'm not sure whether you were able to join our webinar before Christmas for all councillors in Wales on this particular report, but we're hoping to do similar things for national reports going forward, to enable you as councillors to see what's happening elsewhere, what other councils are trying out on this. So feel free to tap into what others are thinking too, because it is a time now to think differently about what will work and what might not work. So again, thank you for raising it. Again, it's an issue for you as a council to decide on your policies and how you want to take that forward in terms of cultural spaces. But again, thank you for raising it, and definitely it's on the radar in that sense. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. I can't see any other indications. Thank you, Non and Gillian. Chief Executive, do you want to add anything?
Just really, just to return the thanks, I think, Mr. Mayor, to our external auditors. We very much appreciated the fact that you were prepared to adjust the way in which you were working with us through the pandemic period. And that was tremendously helpful to us. And also the role you took on as well in brokering some of the good practice that you were seeing around Wales, where we were all coming to similar problems. So I'd just like to say a big thank you for that. The other point I think I'd like to make, Mr. Mayor, as well, is about the way in which our officers have gone about their work over the pandemic period. We've previously talked about some of the huge challenges we've had and how we've risen to those. But I have the privilege of actually reading all the internal audit reports that come across my desk. And without exception, what the internal audit programme has shown this year is that the officers have demonstrated very good governance in the way they've looked after public funding as we've worked through the pandemic period. And I think Council can take a considerable assurance from that. And I know the Governance and Audit Committee will have been reviewing those reports as they've come through as well. So just 2 points from me, Mr Mayor. Big thank you to our external auditors for being prepared to adapt their approach as we've worked through the pandemic period. But also as well, I thought it was an opportune time to just say to you that we've been able to demonstrate some very good governance in the way in which we've covered off those emergency responses too.
Thank you, Chief Executive. The summary is here for noting, so no decision is required.
Mr Mayor, if I could just come in there.
Yeah.
Councillor Sian Harris has just highlighted that she has a declaration of interest. So if I can just confirm with Councillor Harris that it is in regard to the pay policy.
Yeah, sorry, I was away with the fairies then, yeah.
There we are, that's fine. You do have dispensation for that, and I will send you a form with the other members after Council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now go on to item 5. The Chief Executive and all Chief Officers, I understand, you will leave for this item, except for the Head of HR, which is Sheena Rees, and the Democratic Services Officer, Jane Woodman. Jane, please confirm when they have all left the meeting.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I am just looking now at the attendance and I will confirm when they have all left the meeting. Sorry, Mr Mayor, I have to, some of the people have physically left the meeting, but have left their laptops on, but I can confirm that they have left the meeting. So all officers have left.
Thank you, Jane. I call upon Councillor Dorian Jones, the Cabinet Member for Corporate Services and Equality, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Localism Act 2011 requires local authorities to produce a pay policy statement for each financial year. The pay policy statement was first developed and approved by this Council in March 2012. As required by the legislation, the statement is reviewed at least annually and then brought before Council for approval and publication prior to the 31st of March each year. Before you today is the pay policy statement for the year 2022-2023. The content has been updated to take account of any national and local pay related development, and these are summarised in the cover report. The Localism Act requires a statement to set out the Council's policy in relation to a range of issues relating to the pay of the workforce, particularly in relation to the senior staff and how their pay refers to the lower pays within the workforce. The aim is to increase accountability, transparency and fairness within local government in Wales. The cover report sets out the pay multiples as at 31st of March 2022. I'm sure members will be interested to note that since the publication of the first pay policy statement in 2012, the gap between the lowest paid employees and the highest paid employees has reduced. In 2012, the then Chief Executive earned 11 times more than the lowest paid employee. Now it has been reduced to just over 7 times more. The average chief officer in 2012 earned 7 times more than the lowest paid employee, and that has reduced to 5 times more. The head of People and Organisational Development, Sheena Rees, is available to answer any questions that members may have in relation to the pay policy statement. And the recommendation is set out on page 20 in your pack of papers, and it is to approve the pay policy statement for 2022-2023 for publication on the Council's website. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions or comments? Please raise your electronic hand to indicate via the chat function, and I will call upon you in turn. Councillor Steve Hunt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Cabinet Member, for that report. And it is welcoming to see the pay gaps decrease in the way you have mentioned. But Sheena, can I ask a question to you directly, please? In relationship to pay gaps and the work or the responsibilities that goes with these positions, is there a further way of looking possibly to reduce gaps further, or have we got to have a certain level of pay to attract the right people into positions or into the jobs, so that the council, already doing the best job possible in Wales, continue to be one of the driving factors? What I'm getting at is that we know that certain lower paid staff have been leaving the authority for better wages across other authorities, like up in Merthyr with social service workers. There's a danger of not having the right pay structures in place so to attract the right people. And that would go as far as I'm mentioning is the higher paid staff as well. And I don't want to compare chief execs across Wales, but it was noted that some were quite very well paid in other councils. So I didn't know if there's a pay policy as such, an all Wales or Welsh Government pay policy being talked about, so that the balance can be right, so that we function properly. So I just wanted an update. I certainly support what the Cabinet Member has said and today, but I just wondered what work behind the scenes is going on to address an obvious difficult pay structure and policy situation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Sheena, you'd like to answer that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I will. Thank you, Councillor Hunt, for the question. It's a really good and relevant question at the moment. A lot of work is underway looking at the council's recruitment and retention of staff. Our staff, it says in the pay policy statement that our staff are a key resource. Employees are the people who deliver our services. So it's obviously really important that we recruit the best staff and that we retain our staff. So we have established a recruitment task force, which is trying to identify any areas of difficulty, if I put it that way. So difficulty in terms of recruiting staff and or difficulty in retaining staff. So we are seeking to identify the recruitment hotspots and also the turnover hotspots. So it's not widespread across the council. We are a council that actually can retain its staff. So we've got a very good track record, particularly at the senior levels, of retaining our senior staff. We have a lot of stability in the senior team, and we also are very good at promoting. So most of the people at the top of the organisation are people who have worked their way up through the ranks, and those of you who sit on the Special Appointments Committee will certainly have seen that. But I think what you're asking me about is pay benchmarking. So is that something we are looking at doing? And yes, we are looking at pay benchmarking. So we already benchmark at senior levels. So we benchmark across the 22 councils. There is some national work going on a national basis, looking at social worker pay. So that's something that we are involved with, but with colleagues across Wales. And then we use our networks. So I use the HR Directors Network in order to benchmark where we think we've got difficulties in recruiting staff, and we think that pay may be an issue. So apologies, that's quite a lengthy answer, but there is a lot of work underway. Pay is only one of the issues that we look at when it comes to recruiting and retaining staff. So our recruitment task force action plan runs to about 60 different actions. Some of those are linked to pay, but many of them are linked to how we market ourselves as an employer of choice, how we actually tell people about the good things that we can offer them. So pay is just one issue. We have lots of very nice terms and conditions. We have a really great training department who offer really good training and development opportunities for staff. So there are a lot of good things that we can tell people. We just need to make sure we're telling them. So I hope that gives you enough information, Councillor Hunt, but if there is anything else you want, just let me know.
Thank you. Councillor Petervis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just a query that I have put in the chat to Mike. Does this pay policy affect clerks, for example, in schools? And do I have to declare interest if I have anyone, you know, in my family working in schools as a clerk?
Sorry, I would advise that if you have got a member of the family working in school, as Councillor Rees, I would declare it. And if you feel it's prejudicial, then you would have to leave the meeting. But you were not actually agreeing the pay policy for being uploaded onto the website at this stage. So you were not making a decision on the pay policy. You were just approving the pay policy for publishing on the website. So
I have no prejudicial interest at all. It's just the fact that I have a relative who's a clerk in school.
I will add you to the declarations of interest. Councillor, we will send you a form after the meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please. Nigel Thomas Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've just noticed a bit of a discrepancy in the financial impacts when it comes to the pay policy. So we spend 49% of our gross revenue expenditure on pay. But when we look at the guidance for members, elected members on payroll, they advise us that we are likely to see in excess of 50% of our in excess of our general revenue expenditure. So the general revenue expenditure for Neath Talbot Council is £442 million. So if we're on 49%, we're 1% below what the guidance is telling us the minimum level. So that's £4.42 million. So I think that's a relevant discrepancy for me, and it does concern me because in my 5 years as a councillor in Neath Talbot, I'm continually told about a lack of capacity, officer capacity in street care, in regeneration, economic development, property, architectural and property services. And as a result of that, I think we suffer really. And, you know, the Levelling Up Fund has just been, the Shared Prosperity Fund is in front of us going forward. And, you know, there's a lot of questions. Do we have enough officers in the regeneration team, in the economic development team, in property and agricultural services team? And if we did, we would clearly be better equipped to gain some of the millions that's on offer, that grants that councillors like Rhondda Cynnon Taff and Carmarthen and Shire Powys, that they gained in the Levelling Up funds, for instance. Or we could talk about the active travel routes and how much certain counties are gaining from that. But obviously they have the capacity. So I looked at sort of what grade levels we would be talking about in the pay structure. So I would say between grade 7 and grade 13. Grade 13 is about 50 grand a year. So really, we could have 80 officers. With that 1% discrepancy, we could have an extra, in excess of 80 officers. Sheena, that might not be quite right because there might be some expenses I'm not aware of, and that might be a little bit crude. But I could say there was 88 officers that we could have. Now,
just a minute, Councillor Hunt, can I just come in a minute, please?
Yes.
Right, this item here today is a pay policy. It's here to approve and publish on the website. So if questions could be kept to that.
Okay, but I think it's a financial impact, you see, Mr. Mayor, that I'm concerned
No,
about.
and I'm
So
sorry, no, I'm
trying
sorry,
to give a bit of detail,
no,
but I'll leave it
Councillor,
at that if you.
No,
if you
no,
wish.
I'm sorry,
I'll leave it at that.
Councillor, I'm not leaving you carry on in that form. I've just said to you that this pay policy is here today to approve to publish on the website. So if questions could be kept to that, instead of opening it out to try and make it political in some of the issues, which would be unfair to the officer to reply to. Thank you.
I can see no other questions, Mr. Mayor.
I now refer members to the recommendations on page 20 of the circulated report. Could I have a proposer and a seconder, please?
I'll move, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you're in favour of the recommendations.
Jesus.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Mr. Mayor, so that item has been approved as detailed in the circulated report.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I will now go and get officers in. If you would just give me 5 minutes,
Yes,
I will get officers into the meeting.
Yes. Thank you, Jane.
I will confirm.
Thank you, Jane. Agenda item 6.
Jane, you're on mute. Jane, you're on mute.
There we are. Mr. Mayor, if you can continue now, we've called the officers in.
Thank you. I now go on to agenda item 6, which is reappointment of senior management posts. I call upon the Chief Executive, Karen Jones, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just explain, first of all, why Council has got this report today. Normally, these matters are dealt with in the Council's Personnel Committee, but the Welsh Government's recently changed its guidelines, and we now need to be bringing posts at this level in front of Council. So if you're wondering why this has come to Council rather than going before the Personnel Committee, it's essentially because the Welsh Government has changed its guidance very recently, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully the report is fairly straightforward, but if I can just perhaps summarise the main points, Mr. Mayor. The proposal in front of Council today is that you authorise the recruitment process to fill 2 heads of service positions. The first of those being a new head of housing and communities that I'm proposing should sit in the Social Services, Health and Housing division. As members will know, there's been a very significant change in housing policy over the last couple of years, and there's quite a considerable amount of work to do as part of our recovery planning, both across the homelessness aspects of our work, but also in terms of that wider agenda of meeting housing need in the county borough. We've also got significant work around the community safety agenda. We've got a very well-performing community safety team at the moment, but what we're finding is an increase in the statutory duties that's emanating from changes in the UK government's policy. And there is a need now to make sure that we're taking forward our community safety agenda much more closely linked with the work that social services are doing. And the main reason for that is that we find the vulnerable people are very much at the centre of both of those agendas these days. And then finally, Mr Mayor, we had made some very good progress on aspects of poverty, you know, accepting what Councillor Hunt was saying earlier on in the meeting. But undoubtedly what the pandemic has done is it's accentuated inequality across the county borough. And there's a real significant agenda there for us as we move forward over the coming years. So when we've looked at the management capacity, we've currently got a chief officer level. You'll be aware that we didn't replace Hugh Jones's post when he was appointed as chief finance officer. So my proposal is that we repurpose the funding that was attached to that vacancy to create this new role, which I think will then help us to move forward in areas of work which are very much a priority for us. The second post then will be to start the work that we need to do to implement the decision the Cabinet took to bring the indoor leisure services and theatre services currently provided by Celtic Leisure back under the Council's direct management and control. And I think there's an opportunity here to develop greater synergy between what we're doing around the indoor leisure space with a wider leisure offer, tourism, heritage and culture. I think when we discussed the corporate plan back a meeting ago, we all recognise the importance of local people attached to these areas. And there's a real read across as well to some of the opportunities we've got to create new employment in the county borough. In the first instance, we'd be looking to pay for the first year of this post from the corporate contingency budget. But as you know, the Celtic Leisure team has its own management structure, which will need to be changed and adapted as we begin the process to bring the service back in-house. And I'd expect the long-term funding then for this post to come out from the work that we'll be doing on a new business plan to support those changes, Mr Mayor. So hopefully members will feel able to support these proposals. This authority is just to get the recruitment process underway. It'll be for the Special Appointments Committee of the incoming council to actually make the appointments after the election, Mr Mayor. So if there are questions members have got, I'm more than happy to answer them. But the recommendations are there, Mr Mayor, I think on page 76, I believe. 77 maybe.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Members, are any questions or comments? Please raise your electronic hand or indicate via the chat function. I will call upon you in turn. And the first one I have is Councillor Allen Llewellyn, please.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be supporting this proposal. And members will recall that the Plaid Cymru Group has agreed in the budget, has argued in the budget process for several years that we need to ensure enough resources to meet the objectives of the various improvement and corporate plans. And I think, you know, to be honest, there was a relevant question being raised by Councillor Nigel Hunt in the previous item along those lines. But to move on, in the field of housing, we know that we face many challenges in reducing homelessness, and of course now in responding to the various crises such as the current displacement of refugees from Ukraine, Afghanistan and Syria. And I'd like to thank the Leader of the Council for his statement at the opening of this meeting, updating us on the present situation. We also need to have better planning of affordable housing for local people across our communities, particularly as unfortunately we no longer have a council housing stock in Neath Talbot, and we need to ensure that housing associations such as Titalian, Coastal and Pobol are genuinely responsive to local housing needs. In the field of tourism, heritage and culture, first of all, I'd like to pay tribute to the workers, unions and users of Celtic Leisure who made such a strong case for returning leisure services to our council. And I'm glad the Cabinet saw the light in the end. Now, this does indeed give the opportunity for a comprehensive and imaginative approach for combining leisure with tourism and culture. Neath Talbot has suffered from the short-term and short-sighted cuts in the tourism team, the closure of museums and the lack of a cultural strategy. Now, we have missed out on millions in investment in these fields that are so important economically as well as in terms of quality of life and education. And I will support the proposal as part of redressing that balance, as long as these posts are genuinely part of getting things done in those fields. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one, Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just want to welcome both of these new posts today. I think, you know, they're both in quite important areas, which I'm sure most members will support the staffing resource for. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the fact that obviously this is another step forward in terms of bringing leisure back in-house, as mentioned by Councillor Llewellyn. You know, that one of the post holders is going to have responsibility of the effective transfer of those services. So it is nice to kind of have another step forward in that process today. And there was one other thing, a local thing I wanted to pick up on really, which is quite an important line in the report for me in terms of the new head of service around leisure and culture and tourism. Will be the lead officer for Aberafon Seafront. Now, myself and other local members have had a lot of discussions with senior officers for some time about this and improving the management structure around the seafront to allow it to reach its full potential. So I just want to thank the officers for listening and taking those views on board, and you know, obviously Karen in particular. We had a few chats down the seafront about this particular issue. So yeah, really pleased to see it there. And if I don't return after the elections in May, it will be with some comfort that we've taken this step if we approve this today. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Clement Williams, please.
Why are you on mute, Councillor Clement Williams? We can't hear you.
Sorry, Jane, I lost my connection temporarily then, and I just got back in. Yeah, I welcome both posts. Unfortunately, the income generation sort of plan we had kind of came backseat to COVID and the recovery and all that. So this is very, very welcome. But I'm just wondering why the councillor says that Cabinet saw the light, because Cabinet never rejected the proposal to bring it back in-house. We were ready to take it back in December, only we followed the will and wish of the scrutiny committee for further information, so it could be scrutinised properly. So I'm sorry, but I find that very misleading. So just to put the record straight, Cabinet never rejected the proposal to bring it back in-house. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen, please.
Mr. Mayor, before I speak, I don't know if you want to allow Councillor Llewellyn to come back. I see he put his hand straight back up, being it was in response to Councillor Karen Clement Williams, I assume. So before I say anything, I don't know if you want to do that. That's your call.
No. You speak first. Councillor Llewellyn can come back in. Allow him time to come back in.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I'm just going to echo what Councillor Percy and Councillor Llewellyn have said in retrospect of important posts. They certainly are. I mean, I'm not going to repeat some of the points or comments they made. I certainly agree with them. The community safety, Karen, as you know, as chair of community safety and public protection, the antisocial behaviour and other aspects of that job is so vitally important to this Neath Talbot Council going forward, and whoever's on it going in the future, you know, good luck, because it's a vital role. It has that obviously knock-on effect from social housing and other aspects of deprivation, has been mentioned today as well. And I know it's a job that's very difficult to get right. But the more, you know, people who are on board with it and running it, and so this person who you recruit, I'm sure, is going to work in partnership with social housing and other housing departments across, and those who run social housing all over Neath and Talbot, I'm sure, to get things right for the people we represent. So, you know, Celtic Leisure is an aspect that the new council, are going to have to deal with when it's back in May, and I'm sure they will deal with that, being led by this the new recruitment as well, and dare I say cabinet, leaders of this authority and all officers. Again, I'm sure we're all here to make it the best leisure facility possible, and I don't want to get into the politics of who said this.
No,
said that.
no, Councillor, I just come in because remind you, we're dealing with report of appointment of senior management posts. I think we sort of, we're starting to drift too far away now. If you can come
Yeah,
to,
that's fine. I'm just making reference to what was said. That's all. But no,
Yeah.
I agree, and I'm 100% behind these posts. I think they're vital. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thank you. Councillor Llewellyn, you wanted to come back in, did you?
Yes,
Yeah.
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to reply to the Cabinet Member for Finance, Councillor Carol Clement-Williams. I don't want to prolong the debate, but look, I was on the scrutiny committee. I was on the task and finish group. It was held in private, so I won't breach the confidentiality, but we know which way things were going until scrutiny were able to listen to the case made by the workers and the unions and the users of Celtic.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Llewellyn,
You're on mute, Alan.
Oh, right, sorry. With your indulgence, Mr. Mayor, I'll repeat very quickly.
I just wanted to say, Councillor Llewellyn, the decision has been made about the leisure services coming back in. I don't want to see this last council meeting today to be opened up without trying to, the last meeting here, of having a political discussion about this, which is all the decision has been made. And we're coming back, and that's coming back in-house.
I accept that, Mr. Mayor, and I welcome the fact that you invited me to come back in. I'm sorry that I didn't unmute. Just very, very briefly to respond to the Cabinet Member of Finance, Councillor Williams. I don't want to prolong the debate, but I was on the scrutiny and the task and finish. It was held in private, so I don't intend to breach the confidentiality of that, but we know which way things were going. And in the end, when scrutiny was able to listen to the case being made by the workers, the unions, and the users of the leisure services, thankfully, in the end, the right decision was made. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rees.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your efforts in trying to curtail this political angles that the opposition are trying to raise. I think it's deplorable that they are making those kind of cases. Stick to the agenda, please. Not make these political arguments all the time. Just to try to score points.
Thank you. Councillor Clement-Williams.
I'd like to go and see Mr. Councillor Llewellyn. He can give me a forecast on his crystal ball. Thanks.
Councillor Suzanne Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along the same lines, I think it's very easy to drop into a debate in council and assume that you know what is in other people's minds. Nobody knows until people come to the vote, and the vote was to bring it back in-house. Thank you.
Leader.
Yeah, very briefly, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me, I don't want to prolong it. I think people are taking advantage, and getting things out in the open before we come to agenda number 9, possibly. But I think in light of what Councillor Llewellyn and others have said, I think it can be best summed up by we all saw the light, not just the Cabinet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I now refer the Council to the recommendations on page 77 of the circulated report. Could I have a proposer and seconder?
Yeah, move, Mr. Mayor.
I second, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you are in favour of the recommendations.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Mr. Mayor, so that item has been approved.
Thank you. I now go on to item agenda 7. It is the Democratic Services Committee Annual Report 2020-2022. I call upon Councillor Del Morgan, Chair of Democratic Services Committee, to introduce the report. Councillor Morgan.
Diolch yn fawr. Mr Mayor, I will be brief as this item is presented to Council as a formality, although members are welcome to ask any appropriate questions, of course. Firstly, I should point out a minor correction in the title of the item, namely that it should read report by the Democratic Services Committee chairperson, rather than it being the report of the chairperson. The report belongs to the committee rather than to me. I instigated the notion of a Democratic Services annual report some 4 years ago with the intention of establishing a good practice activity for this council. It is a means for the committee members to demonstrate their actions and activities during the year in question, and for these to be recognised and recorded at full council. In addition to the work of the full Democratic Services Committee, members can also see that a number of standing and task and finish groups have also been very busy, undertaking the various tasks allocated to them. So I won't go into the detail here. It's all there in the report for members to see. As this is the final year of the administration, it has been agreed that the report should span a period of almost 2 years, namely from May 2020 through to the end of February 2022. As I did in the final committee meeting, I would wish to thank all members and officers for their endeavours and cooperation during the whole period. So I'll simply move that Council should note and endorse the report. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Members, are there any questions or comments? Please raise your electronic hand or indicate via the chat function and I will call upon you in turn. I cannot see any indication. Oh, I see one. Councillor Percy, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just indicating to say I'm ready to second the report.
Okay.
If there are no questions, thanks.
Okay. Well, I now refer members to the recommendations on page 104 of the circulated report. So now, could I have a proposer and seconder?
I move.
Thank you. Council.
I'll second. Thanks.
If you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you are in favour of the recommendations.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Mr Mayor, so that item has been approved.
Thank you. Item 8 on the agenda, Governance and Audit Annual Report 2021. Again, I call upon Councillor Del Morgan, Chairman of Governance and Audit Committee, to introduce the report. Councillor Morgan.
Diolch yn fawr. Mr Mayor, this item is again presented to Council as a formality, whilst members can, of course, ask any questions.
Thank you.
Once again, I will repeat the need to correct the title of the item to report by the chairperson of the Governance and Audit Committee, not of the chairperson. Exactly the same applies as with the previous item. This report is brought to full council in order to fulfil the need to recognise formally the work undertaken by members of the committee. And as we've heard earlier today, the committee's work has hopefully played a small part in ensuring that those externally auditing our work and procedures at this council have returned extremely positive reports to members of the public. Please note that this report refers to the civic year 2020 to 2021. Once again, my sincere thanks to all members, officers and auditors involved in the work relating to this committee. And a special thanks to our lay member, Joanna Jenkins, and may I wish her and the other new lay members the very best for their work in the future. I move that Council should note and endorse the report. Diolch.
Thank you. Members.
Mr Mayor.
Are there any questions or comments? Please raise your electronic hand or indicate via the chat function and I will call upon you in turn. I cannot see any indications, so I now refer members to the recommendations on page 116 of the circulated report. Could I have a proposer and seconder, please?
I move.
I second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Council, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you are in favour of the recommendation.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Mr Mayor, so that item has been approved.
Thank you. Agenda item 9 is a notice of motion. I have received one notice of motion pursuant to Rule 10.1, a joint motion proposed by Councillor Latham, Councillor Llewellyn and Councillor Jones. I call upon the leader to address the council, followed by Councillor Alan Llewellyn and Councillor Scott Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues will have read the notice of motion on page 121 of these papers. Following discussions with my fellow group leaders, we propose that elected members of Neath Talbot County Borough Council endorse a fair campaign pledge in the format adopted at Appendix 1 on page 122 of the papers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Llewellyn.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm pleased to support this motion. It is important that local elections can be conducted in a way which encourages all candidates and all electors to participate freely and openly with mutual respect for different policies and points of view. This is important to ensure confidence in the democratic process. I won't elaborate further on the details because, as the leader of the council has outlined, the motion itself sets out what we hope to achieve. But can I just add that as this is the last council meeting before the election, I wish all members well across the chamber on a personal level. I'm sure we will have a lively and robust and hopefully fair campaign over the next few weeks. And can I also take this opportunity to thank all the officers and staff for their work and support to all members and residents over the past 5 years. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd.
Thank you. And Councillor Scott Jones, you wanted to come in as well, did you, on this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's just to endorse really in terms of what the Leader of Council have said and the Leader of the Opposition, that this is very much supported by the Independent Democratic group, as referred to Appendix 1 on page 122. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to wish members whose last meeting it will be of council, a very healthy and happy retirement. It's been a privilege to work with many of you, if not all, that's retiring for the future. So thanks very much. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you. So I assume that you move the recommendations now, Leader, Councillor Llewellyn and Councillor Jones, you move?
Yeah, move.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your electronic hand, it will be assumed that you are in support of the motion.
I can see no indications to the contrary, Mr. Mayor, so that motion has been approved.
Thank you. Agenda item 10, questions from members under Rule 9.2. Just to tell you, Council, I have received no questions from members under this Rule 9.2. Now brings me on to agenda item 11, which is urgent items. I have one urgent item and I call upon the leader to address the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned at the start of the meeting and has been mentioned by Councillor Llewellyn and Councillor Jones in the previous item, with this being the last meeting of council before the elections, it would be remiss of me not to mention those elected members who are not seeking re-election and are standing down. It is interesting to note that the councillors that I know of who will not be standing from all parties have nearly 200 years of council service between them, which is a frightening figure when you think about it. But as my colleagues have said, it has been a privilege to work with you all, and I wish you all the very best for the future, and thank you for the work you have done for the citizens of Neath Talbot. And finally, Mr. Mayor, can I thank you for your service as Mayor, a role that you have undertaken with dignity and pride, and you have been a leading light for Neath Talbot Council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for those comments, Leader. I did ask at the beginning of the meeting in my announcements that I would give you all an opportunity if you wanted to speak about the members who are retiring. And the first name I have here who wants to respond is Councillor Aaron Woodcock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful to you for allowing me this opportunity to say a few words
at this, the final meeting of the Council before I retire. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Gwaun Caergirwen Branch Labour Party for their support over the past 27 years and for their faith in selecting me as their candidate. Of course, being selected as a candidate is one thing. Being elected as a public representative is another. And to that end, I must also take the opportunity to thank the public of Lower Brynaman and Tair Gwaith for their incredible, absolutely incredible support over the past 27 years. It really has been an honour and a privilege to represent them. Mr. Mayor, I'm one of only 5 members that remain from the original intake in 1995 to serve on the new unitary authority. And apart from one very difficult period, I can honestly say that I have enjoyed every minute of my time here. Mr. Mayor, the new council elected on the 5th of May will be very different, with new electoral divisions and 4 fewer councillors. However, I would like to extend my best wishes to you all, elected members and officers, and I am confident that you will continue to serve the residents of Neath Talbot as professionally, effectively and efficiently as you have always done. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd, aelodau etholedig a swyddogion, am eich cydweithrediad dros y blynyddoedd. Estynaf yn ymuniadau gorau I chi gyd am y dyfodol. Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much for those comments. Thank you. I think Councillor Derek Morgan, my Deputy Mayor, indicated he wanted to speak.
Diolch yn fawr, Mr. Mayor. I would wish to follow on from Councillor Arwyn Wilcock in terms of being quite a long-standing member. Old, I guess, is the word as well. I was elected to Neath Borough Council and Blaenhonddan community, as it happened, in 1983, a very young person then. But I later moved to Neath and eventually was elected to Neath Town Council in 1989 and Neath Borough Council in 1991 again, and then continuously to Neath Talbot County Borough Council until now. So, Mr. Mayor, if no one talks me out of this retirement, I really do intend to continue serving my own community, if possible, via the local town council and or maybe in other ways. Like Alwyn, I've thoroughly enjoyed my role as an elected representative. And despite some trials and tribulations, I suppose, it's been a very, very positive and a very rewarding experience for me. Briefly, I will say that in the early days, I was very pleased to be associated with the success of completing the A465 road, and also the way in which the development of open cast mining in the valley was kept within boundaries that we would say were amenable to us rather than being a burden or a menace to us. More recently, I'm happy to have seen positive developments here, such as the new Vale of Neath Health Centre and the retention, at least for the time being, of our Valley Care Home. Please note. I'm also bound to say, Mr. Mayor, that I've been very proud over the last year or so to be your deputy in the civic role. Of course, a long, long list of things remain to be achieved for the future. And of course, that list is for others. So now I wish to thank all supportive colleagues here in Neath Talbot, both now and those who are no longer serving, both members and officers of all descriptions. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi am eich cwmni a'ch cymorth. Bob lwc I bawb ar gyfer y dyfodol. Good luck for the future, everyone. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you, Del. We've been together a long time. Thank you very much. I now call on Councillor Dorian Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I go back to the old West Glamorgan days. I've been around in actual politics since 89, I think it is, 33 years, as a county councillor then with the West Glamorgan, and then with Blaenhonddan, which I still a serving member of, and now following on from the work that my husband did before that, and a lot of you on here will remember my husband, and he was, I must say, a very hard act to follow. But I hope that I've served my community as well as he did, and it gave me as well as that. We had a wonderful year as deputy and mayor of this county borough. I've got to say, the last 2 years, I have missed seeing all of you, knowing what you were wearing underneath, not just what we can see. I decided today, as it was the last council, that I was going to put a nice colourful jacket on, because but it's been lovely. It has been a privilege and an honour to work with everybody. All right, I've had arguments, and we all have arguments, and we all fall out. But when we do get together, we have a cup of tea, and I don't know how long this is going to last. I've just had an email now off my clerk who's got COVID for the community council. So instead of having it on meeting all together for the last meeting, we're all going to be doing it like this again. That is one thing that is, a lot of you have heard me say in previous meetings, that we've got to remember those people who can't access digital and who aren't au fait with it. But it has been a saving. It's kept us all in touch. It's kept us all together. And it has been something, the future has caught up with us, really, hasn't it? But I'd just like to say thank you all for your support and your friendship. And I do wish you all well, those of you who are going for election, whatever party. We all argue and we all have differences of opinion. But at the end of the day, we're all here for the benefits of the people out there. That is our primary function, or whatever politics, that is our primary function, is to help the people outside, our residents across Neath Talbot. Thank you again. And Scott, I'm sorry that Miss Whiplash isn't here. I did promise you my fishnet stockings, but you never saw them, did you? But thank you all very much for all your support and all your good wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorian. That was lovely. Thank you. Councillor Stephen, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure all members will be pleased to hear I'm not retiring. But I want to wish everybody who are retired. Doreen, I echo a lot of what you have just said. Irrespective of party politics and the pantomime, I call it, that goes on. I've made a lot of friends, cross-party friends, associates, people who I've learned of. Arwen is one, been a big influence on my short political career with the way he conducts himself. Mr. Mayor, you, for this year, you've been excellent in your roles and fulfilling in the different circumstances. But whoever's not here, but I think we also need to remember those who are chairs of scrutinies, vice chairs, some of those are leaving as well. And we've built up relationships again, cross-party relationships, working with each other. And scrutiny committee, to my belief, is they've been non-political to the majority of them. And I think that's a testament to this authority and how we do our business. But I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, it's been a pleasure and an honour for me to have worked with those who are leaving, and I do wish them all the very best in whatever they decide to do with their futures. And I think it needed to be mentioned. But thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Anthony John Richards, please.
Great, diolch, Mr. Mayor, and yes, I echo what has been said, and I wish everybody who has decided to retire the best of luck. As many of you will be aware, I know she can't be here today, but Lynette Purcell has also decided to retire as our as the County Councillor for Pontardawe at this election. And I just want to take this opportunity to publicly thank Lynette for her years of dedicated service to Pontardawe and the entirety of the county borough. Lynette has been a true champion of Pontardawe, passionately fighting on behalf of her residents. And Lynette took to her role within the committees with the same passion, always asking tough, probing questions and holding executive members and officers to account. I couldn't have wished for a better mentor, and with Lynette's guidance and resolute determination to better our community, we have really worked as a team in Pontardawe with the residents. A real heartfelt diolch, thank you, Lynette, for your friendship, your wisdom, your dedication. You have made a lasting difference to our community, and I have been absolutely honoured to work shoulder to shoulder alongside you over the last 5 years. And I'm sure I can speak on behalf of everyone here today to wish you a wonderful retirement, because I know if she can't make a meeting, she will definitely watch it back. So thank you very much, and best of luck to everyone else on having a wonderful retirement.
Thank you for those comments, Anthony. I just said in my announcements at the beginning of the council meeting that there will be an opportunity for me to recognise the length of service of all the retired members and give them a reception. And I just want to say that as the mayor, in our last council meeting here today, it has been a challenge, as you all know, and experienced in the last 2 years. I've missed all of you. I've come into a council because I've obviously had to come in to sort some business out in my capacity as a mayor at the parlour, and I just miss when all the chats that we used to have before we had meetings, and the friendship that we all enjoyed together. But I also want to say as well that I'm honoured and I am proud of what this council done in COVID, and I found out, I checked and looked at all that you've done in the community as individuals as well, about to try and meet the challenge of COVID and where it was helped the communities. And I thought that's absolutely splendid of all of you, and I thank you for that. And I wish you well for the future, and we may meet again. I put it that way. Best wishes to you all. Thank you. And that's the end of the business for today's meeting. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.